Let's talk more about this Christmas amid a pandemic. Everything is going to be different. Most of us are not gathering the entire families together. Joining us now, we have longtime news anchor turned senior pastor at Roxbury Presbyterian Church in Massachusetts, Reverend Liz Walker. Also, theologian, ethicist, and preacher Russell Moore. He's president of the Southern Baptist Convention's public policy arm called Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. He's also author of the book, The Courage to Stand, Facing Your Fear Without Losing Your Soul. And also joining us, best-selling author and pastor Daniel Darling. His latest book is entitled The Characters of Christmas, the Unlikely People Caught Up in the Story of Jesus. And you know what, Joe? Reminds me of what your Aunt Carolyn always says.
Oh, my Lord, what's that?
Joe, don't do it. Don't lose your soul over it.
Don't lose your soul over it. Exactly. So, Daniel, I want to start with you and the unlikely people who were caught up in this story. Let's sort of mix the boss and the Bible. These were people who were in the darkness on the edge of town in Roman society, in Jewish culture, in everything. They were outcasts for the most part. And what an extraordinary journey they had to take to Bethlehem.
That's exactly right, Joe. I mean, if you think about the characters in the first Christmas, they didn't know that they would become stars for 2,000 years and be the subject of Christmas pageants and Christmas cards. They were just ordinary people, many of whom had little agency or power. If you think of Mary and Joseph, they were a poor peasant couple in a backwater town in the Roman Empire. And Christmas, the first Christmas, came to people who were very dispirited, not unlike the world we live in today. They had waited for the promise of a Messiah, but they were jaded. They had to walk every day and see that Roman flag fly high above their land. They had been occupied by different countries. And so Christmas is not always all about the holly and the jolly and having to stir up these fake joy. It also, we can bring our pain, we can bring our sorrow and our sadness. And I think it's really apropos for this season where people are celebrating Christmas in a much different way, where there's maybe an empty chair around the table, and we have almost 330,000 fellow Americans who died because of COVID. We don't have to. So Christmas, whether you're Andy Williams and you think it's the best time of year, or you're Merle Haggard and you're just trying to make it through December, Christmas, you can bring that to this season.
And Liz, let's talk about how those who were at the first Christmas were the dispossessed and the disregarded of society. I remember in John, I think it was Nathaniel, when he was told that there was a Savior that had come from Nazareth, he immediately asked, can anything good come from Nazareth? But Jesus was the unlikeliest of saviors, given what everyone was expecting. But it was the humility, it was the humbleness, it was the simplicity of the message that resonated 2,000 years ago that still resonates today.
Yeah, this story has always been a story that resonates mostly with people, I believe, with people who are on the edges, people who are not, running the show, people who have no place at the end. We have a couple of people who have been sleeping on the porch of our church, and we haven't, of course, been in service there. We're doing virtual service, and I've been preaching about them because the whole idea of incarnation, the Word made flesh, you start wondering, well, Jesus, if Jesus was on the porch, would you be throwing Jesus out, or would you be trying to help him? So this has always been a story about suffering. It's always been a story about hope in the midst of chaos. We are now in probably the most chaotic time in my lifetime and yours. And how do we find hope? How do we find the Word made flesh in all of this? So I think it really could be a more meaningful Christmas if we started thinking about the depth of the story and not just the superficial joy and peace. Jesus was born into an incredibly chaotic and frightening time.
Russell, the title of your latest book is The Courage to Stand. There are a lot of people in this country and around the world fighting to find that courage right now. There's a lot of hopelessness out there this Christmas season, unfortunately. But you point to Jesus' words of, "Be not afraid." What is your message this Christmas?
Well, my message is everyone is afraid right now, and rightly so. Anyone who's not afraid just isn't aware of what's going on. But I think fear can lead us to a sense of wholeness, and that's why I think I was tempted. We had some neighbors in a house where I used to live across the street who used to do Christmas in July, on July 25th, and decorate and sing carols and everything. And I said to some friends, maybe we should do that this year because it just seems too sad right now to celebrate Christmas. Maybe we should wait till July after the vaccine and after everything is back to normal. But I think it's appropriate to be in a time of fear and seeing that the light comes into the darkness and the darkness does not overcome it. When I think of the shepherds in Bethlehem, the words of the old King James Version that Joe and I grew up with, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. That's what the light of Christ does this Christmas. And I think we should be reminded that although we have to social distance from one another, God has not socially distanced from us. The Word has become flesh and dwelt among us. And that's good news.
Well, I'd love to develop on that point with Liz Walker, because it's not just hopelessness that many are struggling with in the face of death, in the face of that empty chair at their table, in their home, not just at Christmas, but forever now. But also extreme loneliness, to the point where it's leading to a mental health crisis, especially for young people. What is your message to those who follow you about handling that, especially during the holidays?
Well, we work specifically with people in our neighborhood who have been traumatized by violence, by racism, by all kinds of systemic trauma. And our message to them always is that we are community, even when we can't reach each other physically. We just talked about Jesus being the light of the world. The light works when it comes through us. And so we become the light. No, we can't touch each other. We shouldn't be together now, but we should try to express that light in any way we can. Random acts of kindness with a phone call or with a smile on Zoom, or what you're doing now, to just talk about the meaningful things. We have to be the light now because we are in the midst of darkness.
You know, Daniel, if you listen to how people define Christianity, whether it's in politics or whether it's in popular culture, it's so twisted and convoluted from the message of the Gospels. As I tell my kids when we're going through the Bible, I say, look at the red words. Look at the red words. That's Jesus talking. And let's look closely at the red words. And Daniel, time and time again, what's Jesus talking about? He's not talking about doing the huge, great things in times like now. What he's talking about is giving a cup of water in the Master's name, right? Feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, giving a sip of water for those who were thirsty, visiting those in jail. It's the small things which takes me to every Christmas Eve and every Southern Baptist church I grew up in. At the end of the service, we'd sing Silent Night. The lights would be turned off, would light our candles, and the preacher would hold it up, and he'd say, go out and punch holes in the darkness. That was Jesus' ministry, one person at a time, one light at a time. And isn't that what we need to remember now, what the true meaning of Christianity is, what the true meaning of Jesus' message is? It's us helping that person who is hurting, who is destitute, who needs a helping hand.
That's exactly right, Joe. And I think this Christmas affords us an opportunity to get back to the real meaning of Christmas, that God has come into the world, into a world of darkness and brokenness, that God has visited us in Jesus, this baby who was both human and divine. And as you said, Jesus came to the people, not to the powerful, not to Caesar, not to Herod, but he came among the dispossessed. He came among those who had no power or agency, and he used ordinary people to communicate his message. And I think this Christmas, we can get caught up in what's going on in the world. We can get distressed about expressions of Christianity that we feel don't accurately reflect what true Christianity is, or we can just commit to, with whatever power and agency we have, to share the good news of the gospel, to go help those who are lonely, to visit those who are in distress, and do that with whatever small power and resources that we have, and we can be the light to the people in our own communities.
And so, Russell, as we talk about how sometimes the meaning of Christianity is twisted in popular culture, let's talk about the meaning of Christmas. For too many, it's about piles and piles of Christmas presents. It's about commercialization. It's the antithesis of that scene in Bethlehem so many years ago.
Right. And I think this year is an opportunity to get back to what really matters. I think many people are having that question when they're wondering, am I going to be alive next year? Are my loved ones going to be alive next year? It really does force one to think about what matters in my life. And I think that what God is leading us toward perhaps is what happened with Joseph in the Christmas narrative. After all of these events, he goes to an ordinary life where he's living a life of faithfulness to God in raising this child with the child's mother. And I think that maybe what God is calling us to is an ordinary life of meaning through the gospel. And I think this is a time where that's weighing on many of us.
Reverend Liz Walker, Russell Moore, and Dan Darling, thank you so much for joining us. Merry Christmas to you all. And we'll be right back with much more Morning Joe.